Welcome everybody to the rant. We're doing this as the first postseason, meaning not postseason in a good way, like you talk about the playoffs, but postseason as in the season is over show. The complete season is over, but it's a good run. I think there are a lot of positive takeaways from this season that we'll get into in this episode and the forthcoming episodes. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it was a success. It felt like I hate all we have, it feels like, to compare to is the recent run where the Cubs won the World Series, and kind of like we know what that felt like. And so I think for me, at least, I continue to go back to that. And this, if anything, felt a little like 2015. Not really. The Cubs got really hot the second half of 2015. Whereas the second half of this year, they got really cold and just backed into the playoffs. And so, it felt like a year where, they definitely improved. A 92 win season was a 9-game improvement over last 2 years. And so that was good. You expected them to take a step forward. It didn't feel like once they got to the playoffs that they had the ammo necessary to be able to win the World Series. And certainly they didn't, because they're not in the playoffs any longer. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I laid this out a little bit. There's been a lot of people, and understandably so, right? Like I'm not telling anybody how they should view it. I'm not saying anybody's wrong one way or the other. I can't look at this season, even understanding some of the critical injuries that came up, especially in the pitching staff, as anything other than a disappointment. Right? Like, this was a team that hey, we could losing Justin Steele, that really sucked. Losing Cade Horton, I think, clearly affected the trajectory of the playoff run. I don't think that. I know it did. It very clearly did, because we all bitched for 2 weeks about why Matt Boyd or Shohei Imanaga was starting or not starting. But to me, it came down to what this offense was early and then was not as the season went along. And I think what we see from that, like, you can't have, there's no such thing as too much power. And I look at that, especially in the postseason, right? Because we saw that, and the Cubs had been out homering their opponents, but what we saw over the course of that Brewers series, the Brewers hit more home runs than the Cubs did, right? They just, in the games that they won, that was why. And the Brewers were routinely throwing guys out there. The Cubs have one dude who throws 100, right? Now, some of them get close, right? Cade Horton gets to the upper 90s. He obviously wasn't pitching there. Brad Keller can get there, but it's Daniel Palencia. But the Padres have like 5 dudes who throw close to 100 or close. The Brewers have multiple dudes who they were comfortable going out there and blowing it by guys and missing bats. The Cubs did not have that, and so they relied, and we knew this would be the case, right? This is like, and where I'm disappointed is that we knew, and we've known for years actually, that they haven't had enough power in the pitching department. Even though the rest of them, and I'm talking like a decade now, we're going on this, okay? If not a little bit longer. That's my takeaway, is that they have not done a good enough job of constructing a team. Getting to the postseason is one thing, and this is what we've said, again, all along. Getting there is one thing. The concern is, once you get there, can you hang with the other teams that have, even on a shoestring budget in the Brewers case, gone out and assembled the kind of arms that go out there and beat good hitters? And we saw that time and time again. What did we see come up with? The Cubs had who should be a superstar hitter in Kyle Tucker, granted the injury and the timing and all that, but they had men on first and second with no outs. Tucker had a 3-1 count, and Aaron Ashby blew 2 fastballs by him, one of which was right down the dick. Strike 3 was a really, really tough pitch, like 99, down and away, get it. But Tucker missed a 3-1 fastball down the dick. You cannot have that happen. But when you throw that hard, if that's 94, it's probably a 3-run homer deep in the bleachers. We're having a totally different conversation. So again, that's just where I come to is I am
and in that moment, that's the guy. I mean, as a Cubs fan, that's the guy you want up.
You should.
But it was like I found myself during that at bat thinking that exact thing, like being like, "Oh man, Tucker's up," and then I caught myself and was like, "Hold on a second, this is the guy we should want up. This is the guy in this situation of the entire team that we should want taking this at bat." And yet I was sitting there afraid that he was going to fail.
Right. And then after that, right. So you went from this great and to no fault, it was like Seiya Suzuki came up next. He failed there. Now he supplied their only run for the second time. Like, think about that, right? Second inning home run. He had a 3-run first inning home run a couple games before that. 2 of the games they lost in Milwaukee, he provided their only offense with a homer. That is a problem, right? But you felt like Tucker going down on strikes was bad. Then when Suzuki went down, and granted, that was a liner. There was a hard liner. It was like 101, 102, something like that, right? It was, a very well struck ball. But then as soon as that's caught, you're like, okay, now it's 2 out. Like now, and then once the Brewers went up 3-1, it felt insurmountable. And that's where I come down to it. That's where my real disappointment is. This is the best offense in baseball, or it was for a while. Most runs scored. They were up there in the top with home runs. They were stealing a ton of bases. Everything was working out well. And then for whatever reason, we can point to 15 different things. That was no longer the case. And so it went from a team that didn't really need to have great pitching because they were scoring 5-6 runs a game to a team that could not win without immaculate pitching from the starting rotation and the bullpen combined. And when you get to playoff baseball, again, those things are going to be stressed. The pitching was actually good. To give up 3 runs in a game 5 on the road to the team with the best record in baseball, that in and of itself should be a win. You should be able to score at least 3 runs. They could not, right? And so that's just what it came down to. And you just had this kind of up and down failure by multiple players, who just didn't live up to expectations, and it failed them when it mattered most. They didn't go out and get the big bat. Right? Willie Castro was their big offensive addition.
And when you say they didn't go out and get the big bat, you mean at the trade deadline.
Right. At the deadline. They didn't do – they really didn't add much of anything at the deadline.
No, they didn't. They didn't at all.
And look, I get it, right? I get the idea that to have acquired an impact starter at the deadline would have cost them either Matt Shaw or – Cade Horton, the latter of which was absolutely a no-go. Now, a lot of people will be revisionist about that. Shaw didn't do that good in the like that. But that's not the price. You're not going to give up your number 1 prospect for a rental pitcher, many of whom actually ended up sucking down the stretch anyway. So it's like we could look at that a few different ways, But to me, again, knowing how fickle the pitching and the pitching was not. Outside of a couple of things there, the pitching wasn't even their worst problem. It's just they could not score. They scored 3 runs on 3 solo homers in the first game. Not that it mattered because they gave up 6 in the first inning. But that was so sporadic, right? Then they scored 3 runs in the second game because all they get is a Shota Imanaga homer. They scored 1 run in the last. Like, pitching was not the problem in this. We could look at game 1, but like if you're only scoring 3 sporadic runs on homers, you're not getting hits. You're not stealing bases. You're not doing any of these things. Offensively, they failed. Mm-hmm. They absolutely failed. You could have had throw whatever pitcher out there. Like, if you're not giving them more than 3 runs, you shouldn't be expecting to win, period. So that, to me, was where things got lost, that they just didn't have the thump. And you see that. Like, you look at all these other teams. Look at these games that are playing in the NLCS. Look what the Blue Jays are doing. And not even the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays are not doing as well. Look what they did to the Dodgers, I should say. And now look what the Mariners are doing to the Blue Jays. These aren't 1-0 games. They're not 2-1 games. Like, these teams are banging the ball all over the place and scoring a bunch of runs. That's just the Cubs did not have a team that looked like it was able to compete at the plate consistently. So Yeah, that's the frustrating part to me, is they looked uncompetitive so frequently. It's not like they were close and this thing should have gone a different way. There's multiple times when you felt when they got down 3-1 in that game 5, it felt like it was 30-1. It was like 3-1. Oh my God, that is an insurmountable lead, which by no means it should have been, but that's how it felt.
Well, if we look at the Cubs lineup, right? I mean, I think if the number one guy in the postseason was Michael Busch, and I think there's a lot to be, really excited about when you look towards the future for Michael Busch. He's not a great defender. That's the only downside. But his bat is
good. He's good.
I mean, his defensive metrics are negative.
But you don't need to worry. Yeah, but you don't need to. I mean, But I mean, he's for first baseman.
He just needs to be able to dig the ball out of the dirt.
Yeah, just do that every once in a while. You're fine.
Yeah. The real problem I think was, and Seiya Suzuki really played well in the postseason. And, I mean,
he came over. Nico Horner batted like 450. He doesn't have any pop, but he had the little solo shot. But I mean, outside of it was Horner. Happ had the big homer, but it was Horner, it was Busch, it was Suzuki in the postseason. A couple of guys, like I said, Happ flashed. PCA had a good game in there.
Shaw got a critical hit.
Yeah, he got a hit, and he drew some walks. But there wasn't anything like. It was those three guys, right? But you didn't have somebody kind of stepping up, like freaking Andrew Vaughn hit a couple of bombs for the Brewers. I'm sorry, but the Brewers had guys up and down their lineup where it just felt like they could beat you in a number of different ways. Like it didn't matter who it was or where they hit in the order. Somebody was going to step up. Who's got Jake Bowers, right? Like these guys who were just doing stuff. And the Cubs just did not consistently get that. How often outside of the 6-0 game, right, when they tied it, and that one felt great. They had so much momentum, but how much did this thing did it ever feel like they were catching a roll, that they really had some offensive momentum? You come out and score 4 runs in the first inning of game 3 and then don't score again and almost piss that game away. Game 4 that they won was really the only time where they jumped ahead and then they actually played add-on, interestingly enough, in a game when it didn't matter, when they shut the Brewers
But they left
out.
a lot of runners on base. I think they were like 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position in that game. So it's they scored some runs, but really they should have scored more runs. I mean, it could be, you're not going to consider it a failure because they won the game, and they scored 6 runs, but they really did fail when it came time to driving those runs that were on base in.
Right. And
which was consistent.
And I don't feel like they did a good enough job given how few people they got on. And we talked about this on our last show. It's hard to steal bases when you don't get a bunch of runners on base in the first place. But they just really, like that, again, the game 4 really felt like the only one, even though they did have some failures there. It really did feel as though they were not pressing the action. You know what I mean? Like they were just kind of the Brewers dictated the pace that whole time. And the Cubs just kind of went with it and they were being reactive rather than proactive to a lot of those things. And just kind of like, oh yeah, our time will come. It'll be fine. It's like, dude, no, like, and again, the players have to execute. So that's not a council thing. That's not a Jed Hoyer thing. That's not just a player thing. There's plenty. Apply the blame however you like, but they just did not look to me like the difference when we watched them in 2015. You watched them in 2016. Not to make a direct like, oh, this team should have been like that, but when I talk about like the philosophy of kind of watching those teams, is it felt like they were constantly on the attack, even if they weren't all, they weren't always scoring runs, obviously, but it just seemed like they were always setting up their next move. It was like chess to watch them. That move right there, or the next one, in and of itself might not yield immediate success, but you felt like they were always building towards something bigger. And I just didn't see that with this team. It just felt like there was a lot more. It was a lot more hollow. It was a lot more passive, for lack of a better term. And that could just be revisionist history of my own and looking back on it and saying this, but I feel like I've been pretty consistent with that kind of critique the whole season.
Yeah, it didn't feel as unified a bunch as we saw back in 2016.
Yeah, at least not like on the field, right? I think these guys got along perfectly fine. I don't think there were any problems in that regard. But yeah, it felt like they kind of went in fits and spurts. It wasn't. It didn't feel like that relay race of handing the baton off to the next guy and something like that. It's sort of like you said, it felt like they were all kind of running their own race to an extent.
It did. It did. It felt very individual.
Yeah, and that's, again, I want to be very clear on that. I don't think there are any fractured relationships there. I don't think there are any problems in the clubhouse. I don't think Craig Counsell has lost the team by any stretch. It's just the way the team was constructed, the way the lineup may have been set, or the way they were performing. Yeah, it just kind of was like, oh, okay, we're going to need 2 or 3 individual performances, and you're going to have to do it yourself today, Michael Busch, because nobody else is out there to help you. Good luck on that island.
One thing that I heard through the season when Rizzo came back as an ambassador, and he talked about 2016 and the impact of bringing on someone that's really just a big hitter, like, you're swinging for the fences, bringing in a guy like Chapman at the trade deadline, and the message that sends and translates into the clubhouse to those guys that are in there. And then look at what the Cubs did at the trade deadline, adding Willie Castro, and so like it's things like that where you have to look and say, like, could the Cubs have added, and this is to your point earlier, could they have added somebody that was more impactful, that would have not just helped the ball club more, but sent the message to the clubhouse that this is real, we're going for it. And you didn't feel that didn't happen at the trade deadline. There wasn't the feeling of, hey, this owner is putting the chips all in on this team. And that translates, because I think that, you make a move like that, and we don't know what the impact would have been, but it's hard to think they would have played any worse than they played going down the stretch. And just that momentum and that spirit and that energy that gives to the team, it just that wasn't there this year, and I felt like that's a big miss.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, like you said, there's so much psychologically, right? And it means nothing if you go get that guy and he lays an egg. Like if they had traded for Eugenio Suarez, right, and then he comes in and doesn't do a damn thing. Okay, well, any emotional lift from that is kind of gone. But we did see, like, but it worked both ways. Like Willie Castro, really good defensive versatility, but he also came to Chicago and his bat disappeared. And that's part of it. Michael Soroka, really good if he's in limited outings and being a reliever, which was kind of the idea, but then he comes out and gets a start and then he's hurt 2 innings in. And so, that's the 2 biggest acquisitions that Andrew Kittredge was a really good one, but he kind of struggled a little bit.
He's a supplemental guy. I mean, these are supplemental signings, right?
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. Like, he's not going to fire you up, but what I'm saying is the 2 biggest acquisitions they made, technically, right, biggest relatively speaking, either did, like, they're not getting anybody fired up, and then one got hurt right away and one really sucked offensively for the most part. And so now you have like the opposite effect, right? Like now you're kind of like, okay. Like that's how you sort of feel about it. Like, all right, well, we got what we got. And then it's like, okay, but the guys we got for the most part aren't really doing anything to help. And so now you're second guessing things and you start to look backwards and should we have done something differently? And I think it has a deleterious effect, statistically in some cases, but then I think psychologically it's just sort of, all right, like I said, it's just, hey, the chopper's coming to, I'm stuck on this desert island. Here they come to help, and then they drop you down a crate that just says, hey, there'll be another. Sorry, this one's empty, but there's some stuff coming on the next. and there's nobody's coming to rescue you, right? Like save yourself. And and they couldn't do it. They just couldn't. And we saw injuries start to pile up. I think the season just wore on them, and I don't know. Despite a few bright spots, that second half was just kind of like, okay, cool,
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things where you can look back and we can talk about the ifs, maybes, buts, all the things that we think could have or should have happened.
Whose butts?
But at the end, the butts. I'm talking about the Brewers' butts.
Oh, well.
And
speaking of which, it's not a Dodger, it's not a Los Angeles, but I do have on my Brooklyn. It's actually my son's, but a Brooklyn Dodgers. It's Jackie Robinson. So
how
Los
dare
Angeles.
You?
Yeah, but I'm channeling my. Oh, so we got to talk about this. I'm sure we'll talk about the Brew, but so Tyrese Halliburton, right? He was wearing a Pacers jersey for their preseason game on Saturday when the Cubs and Brewers were playing. Last night in the Pacers game, he's hurt. He blew out his Achilles or whatever, so he's out. But he was wearing an Ohtani Dodgers jersey last night. So I'm like, what the heck? So come to find out. So here's the level of petty this dude is. So he grew up. Tyrese Halliburton grew up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, right? He is a Brewer. He grew up a Brewers fan. They invited him in 2024. They invited him to throw out the first pitch of the game. But then when the Pacers eliminated the Bucks from the playoffs in the NBA playoffs, they rescinded the invitation. And ever since then, he just does everything he can to troll the Brewers organization. And I love that level of pettiness that he is showing. And where that differs, I know a lot of people are talking about, I don't mind that the Brewers flew an L flag. I'm pissed off that they flew the wrong damn flag. If you're gonna do it, do a blue flag with the white L. It's not the W flag with an L, you dumbasses.
This is the flag. I have it for those listening to the podcast. You can't see it, but it is a picture of the blue L flag with the white L letter L, and then I'm showing the picture of the Brewers, the flag obviously somebody from Milwaukee designed and
Trevor McGill did it.
Had the blue L flag. It's like there is an L flag. It's almost as if they didn't realize there actually really is an L flag,
right?
That's actually a thing,
right? That's my problem with it. It's not that you flew the L flag. It's like now part of it caters to the same little brother mentality that so many of their fans have and everything else. It's not that they have an L flag. It's that they got the wrong. Like, if you're gonna do it right at the very least, right? Like, don't be a bunch of amateurs. I know you don't spend a bunch on your payroll, and that's the thing that you take pride in or whatever. But like, at least get it right. That's all. It's like it's when it's the Seinfeld. If you remember back to like Tim Watley when he converted to Judaism. But it was for the jokes, and like Jerry Seinfeld was upset about it. Not that he was converting to Judaism, but that he had done it for the jokes. Like as a comedian, he was upset for why Tim Watley did it, right? I'm not upset that they're trolling the Cubs. I'm upset that they're just doing it wrong. It's such an amateur thing that would have taken very little effort to fix. It's just
if you're going to troll a team, freaking do it right. Troll a team correctly.
You're right.
My question to you. Yeah. Have they started a new tradition? So the Cubs have a tradition. Most people know at the end of the game, they fly. If they win, they fly the W and they sing the song.
Yeah.
And so my question is are the Brewers now going to have a tradition where when they lose a game, they do what they fly the L? And I wrote some lyrics here for the Brewers' new song. Okay. Playoff season's underway.
Oh, you are
Let's look to see who the Brewers play. Hey, Milwaukee, what do you say? Brewers gonna lose today. They're singing Brewers blow. Brewers blow. Hey, Milwaukee, what do you say? The Brewers gonna lose today. They lack the power. They lack the speed.
You're really going for the whole thing.
Represent the National League. And that's all I got.
Okay, good, because I was gonna have to ask you to stop. But yeah,
I think I see them playing that song when they lose, flying the L flag because they like the L flag. Now
I
that's
do.
trolling.
Yeah. Now I do think, however, that, and now part of this has to do with recency bias, and the Cardinals just haven't been as good lately. But it feels as though, so even with the Cubs Cardinals thing, and there's some back and forth there, but it is a little bit more gentlemanly. It's gone. The Cubs Brewers thing, Cubs Cardinals been around for a lot longer. Cubs Brewers feels a bit more intense, and like it's got a bit more of a hard edge to the rivalry right now than the Cardinals. So I could see this being a thing though that is going to ignite the rivalry, or it's already been ignited, but to kind of pour a little gasoline on it. And I think this is definitely something, it's like the teams, like they plant their flag on the other team's field or whatever. There's certain things, walking across the logo or whatnot. Like, again, as silly as it was and kind of to an extent misguided, some of these folks will take it seriously, at least the fans. Like, it's definitely something like you're already, we're doing like they lose the Brewers or they lose to the Dodgers and people are flying the flag again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I may have posted something on our Twitter and Facebook pages that went a long way. But yeah, it's one of those things where it feels like if you win, who cares about, who you just beat at the end of the day? You're going on. You're looking forward to the Dodgers. Right. And it felt like this kind of overshadowed their win. A lot of people were talking about it. I think it was just Cubs fans. It was like national news that people were talking about this. And it's just kind of like, man, it just felt really petty at the end of the day, that like something that they didn't need to do. It wasn't a very classy move in any way, shape, or form. It didn't really impact the Cubs because the Cubs lost. It's fine. But to kind of rub it in that you beat the team that you beat, I think is really where it kind of like felt like it went a little over the line in terms of like, you're just trying too hard and you just care too much about beating just this one team. And I don't like, yeah, I think the Cubs, when they beat the Cardinals, but I don't remember us ever going like to like that overly
no, there was
petty.
never,
At least
it was never, yeah, it was never like there's
fans
nothing
maybe
that you're gonna kind of tweak them about, or at least
yeah,
not like that. But
you tip your cap, you say, hey, this team tried, they put their best into the games, all the things, right? You try to stay classy. I think most organizations do something like that. And you didn't hear anyone from the Brewers side come out and criticize the flying of the L flag or even speak to it. And really that I saw, I don't know, it felt kind of cheap.
yeah, it's just, it is what it is. And I get it. You want to celebrate that stuff, or I could see fans doing it. But again, I'm less concerned about the gesture itself as I am them just getting it dead wrong when it's such an easy thing to get right. It's just dumb stuff. Like it's just say I would feel the same way even about myself. Yeah, like nothing pisses me off more about myself than if I make like a really clever joke, and those are not very common, and then I have like dumb spelling error or something in there. You know what I mean? Like I fat fingered something. I'm like, oh god damn it, like I felt so good about that, and then it's been out there for like a couple hours, and then I finally realized it. And I'm like, it would have been fun if you just like. It's now all I can focus on is the mistake. You know what I mean? It's like everything else was fairly cool. Like it would have been. I don't know that I would have respected it, but like the Brewers themselves, the Brewers social media account showed the thing of like the blue L flag with the correct L flag dropping down on the bean, right? The Millennium Park, the Cloud Gateway or whatever, the bean in Chicago. And like, okay,
Appropriate.
At least it was the right flag. Like, again, do I really think that a team should be like, celebrate your own win? Why are you celebrating someone else's loss? Right now.
Well, and I think in the regular season, I think that makes sense. Like you got a rivalry, like kind of
you have fun with it, whatever,
back and forth at each other, things like that. But when you're in the playoffs, you're playing for something a lot bigger here than just beating your rival. Like you're trying to get to and win the World Series, and it's obviously beating the Dodgers is a tall order.
Right. And I think that's, you kind of spoke to it earlier. It felt like they were more concerned with simply beating the Cubs than they were on their own success and then what that meant for them, which is in this case hosting the National League Championship Series. It's like if you're the little brother mentality, right? We can talk about that as and they can say, "Oh, that's not the case," but they've continued to talk about themselves as underdogs, and so to an extent, I understand that this kind of goes along with it. But you kind of lose your claim to underdog status when you had the best record in the majors for like pretty much the entire second half, right? Like you spend less than Dodgers, whatever, but and I get it. You got to hype yourselves up. You got to do whatever. But there's a point at which I think that underdog status can actually hurt you a little bit in that, you're not actually looking at this as, no, we're the better team. We're supposed to win. And so like, act like you've been there. And I know they haven't because they haven't experienced that ultimate success before, but
it was funny to hear Dave Roberts commenting about, Pat Murphy and how he's trying.
I don't buy any of that.
Yeah. He's like, we've seen this act before.
Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. I mean, the Dodgers have been there. They know what they're doing. They've got just like an outstanding team, top to bottom. Obviously, they're going to be very hard to beat. And if the Brewers don't win tonight, the series is over. I don't think there's any way they have a shot to beat the Dodgers. I don't think there's any way they have a shot to beat the Dodgers in general. I just think their pitching is just it's not great, right? I mean, they're pitching bullpen games every game.
Right. Well, and that's, you saw Brandon Woodruff is that, which is like kind of everybody knew. We talked about this before. Like it was pretty obvious with the lat strain like he experienced. Like that's not just a 2 weeks on the IL kind of a thing. Like you're probably done for the rest of the postseason.
Yeah.
And not having him, especially with what we saw them have to do against the Cubs, like outside of their bullpen. And then, you look at obviously Freddie Peralta, they like, and he got roughed up in his second start there. But like Quinn Priester was having all kinds of problems. Is Jose Quintana a guy that you're going to trust out there? Like Chad Patrick has looked really good in relief. Do you seem like how against a lineup like what the Dodgers have? That becomes all this pick your poison. Now, hey, they were almost able to come, like the Dodgers did their best to give that thing away in game one. But yeah, it just in a long series now, like they had a hard enough time piecing together enough pitching in a 5-game series after they hadn't even had to play. They got the bye, right? We saw how much the Cubs struggled to get through not only 3 games with the Padres, but then themselves trying to get through those 5 games with the Brewers. Now you're talking 7 games against the Dodgers, right? After you come off of this. So
it feels unlikely.
I just don't think this is the same thing I said about the Rays back in the day, right? We can praise them and I commend absolutely. The one thing that I'll say nicely about the Brewers, they've done an excellent job of building up their organization, of doing a lot with a little when it comes to their payroll and how they acquire players and how they evaluate and develop those players. They've done a very good job. It's not very different from what we've seen year over year in Tampa Bay. However, this is the point in the season, especially as it goes along. This is why Tampa could never get it done in the playoffs, because they just don't have the horses. There comes a point and it works. And that might be weird to say because over 162 games, which is a marathon, the Brewers outlasted everyone else and had the best record. But it's obvious the calculus changes in the postseason. It is a different type of baseball game. And those teams like the Dodgers that have spent tons and tons of money to acquire all of these superstar players, generally, not always, but generally they're going to give themselves more room for error. They're going to be able to go out there and roll more guys out. They're going to replace dudes if they get hurt and those things. And speaking of which, Tanner Scott is the name that I was trying to come up with. I don't know how on earth a week later, I'm like, oh yeah, Tanner Scott was who I couldn't come up with last week out of nowhere, who the Brewers replaced, right? Or the Dodgers. I can't even speak. How do I remember a name from a week ago? I don't know. But that's what it comes down to, right? And bringing it back to the Cubs, that's where I continue to have been disappointed when people and I don't know if you noticed this. Did you notice there was a bit of a, not really a meme, but there was something going around the last couple of days, and they even addressed it. I think Bruce Levine addressed it on Mully and Hall, but it was the dude had shared again the chart of payroll relative to revenue and how the Cubs were down at like 27th, 28th, which is something that people, we had a little reel that's clipped. It's one of our very most viewed reels of me saying it's embarrassing that the Cubs are down there with the likes of the White Sox and the Marlins and all that. Lo and behold, this is what it comes down to, right? This is what you can't necessarily buy wins, but you can definitely buy margin for error, right? You can buy a better chance. And I look at, like, you've been to Disney World. You've been to Disney World? Disneyland?
When I was very little.
Okay, so it's been a while. But any amusement parks anymore, right? They've got the whole thing. You buy your ticket, and you can either choose to get in line for the ride and in the general line, or you can buy like the lightning pass. You know, you can pay 10, 15 bucks, whatever it is. And then they assign you a time and you get to go through the quicker line, right? Now, at the end of the day, you and I are both going to get through. You spent just your admission ticket. I spent my admission ticket with my lightning lane stuff. We're both going to get to ride the ride. It's just that I'm going to get through that ride quicker than you are, which is going to give me more opportunities to go do other rides, right? And if I choose to spend more money, I can do those other rides quicker. And at the end of the day, we might both get to the same place. We might both get our the rides done that we wanted, but I'm going to do so quicker and have more room to do other things. That, to me, is kind of where you look at right now when I look at the Dodgers and the Brewers. They're both in the same place. They're both on the same ride. One of them just has a lot more margin for error going on than the other. And that has nothing to do with the game one win. That's just how it was going into it. And so do I need the Cubs to spend as much as the Dodgers or the Mets, who, you know, didn't even make the postseason? No. But just as we were talking at the beginning, I published a piece that just talked about their projected arbitration raises, kind of where the money's going to come in, and just, you know, I think this leads to something. Not that we don't have to answer this now, but when we do in the course of the offseason, when we kind of preview what's going on, when we talk about what the Cubs are going to do, it does raise a very interesting question. The Cubs were just beaten in the division, not only in the regular season for the division lead, but then in the NLDS by a team that spends much, much, much less money on the payroll than they do. The Cubs hired the manager away from that team who did more with less, and who, you know, has done okay in guiding the Cubs. And yet we see Pat Murphy still continuing that with the Brewers. Do the Cubs look at this and say, we just got beat by the Brewers? They beat us in the regular season, not in the season series, mind you, which the Cubs did still win 7-6. But in terms of overall record, right? And then we're head-to-head beaten by them in the postseason. Do the Cubs look at that and say, we need to spend this much more to ensure that we are better than the Brewers? Or do they look at it and say, boy, we got to make some organizational changes, because if the Brewers can win with spending less money, we need to be able to be more efficient with our money. And so, or do they just stay the same?
And that just seems like a bad way to think. Like, the Cubs are not the Brewers. The Cubs should not attempt to be the Brewers or the Tampa Rays. It's you can't try to put yourself in that position, because you're not a small market team and you don't have to make that work. And right. So that you've got to look at the situation from the perspective in which you currently reside. And that is, the Cubs are a major market team, top 2-3 markets, and they should be spending like that, and they should be drafting well, and they should be developing well, and they should be doing all the things that the teams like the Brewers and the Rays also do well. It's not an excuse to do that poorly, but you've got other resources. And so that's where I come out is, and when you look at what's getting ready to happen, I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes on this Cubs team next year. You know, you're going to lose Kyle Tucker. You have to replace that left-handed power bat. And we're kind of right back where we were at the end of last season, saying the Cubs have to have a left-handed power bat. They did. They got Kyle Tucker. But I think, as we've seen, I don't think a 1 year, a guy with a 1 year deal or that expires at the end of the season is the answer for the Cubs. The Cubs need a guy who's going to be a left-handed power bat that's going to be there for preferably 3 years, 2 to 3 years at least, is somebody who you can feel like is going to be a part of the team going forward. And so that you can look, I mean, they've got a great young base of talent. I don't know where Kevin Alcantara is going to play, but I mean, they're probably going to end up having to trade some guys to make room for some other
sign
guys.
Kyle Schwarber, give him whatever
Owen
he
Kesey.
wants. Sign Schwarber, make him the DH, and then that frees up. You give him a 4-year deal. Boom. Now, who cares where Alcantara plays? Who cares where Casey plays? Because you know what you're going to do? You're going to trade them for a power arm now.
And Ballesteros.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of those 3. Now, do I think they'll sign Schwarber? No, I do not. Do I think it's more likely that Seiya Suzuki gets put back in right field more permanently, or for the remainder, than Casey's the DH? But even then now you don't have a spot for Ballesteros. They're going to have to trade some of their top prospects, like multiple of their top prospects, because they just don't have anywhere to go. And we've seen them do this with guys where they held on to them too long and then got nothing for them. Schwarber technically being one of those.
Perfect example.
Right? Yeah. And you just waited for Happ does not need to go. Why do we no, God damn it. Happ is fine. He's still got 1 year left anyway. But he had another fine season. And I know everybody, he was bad for these, but he wasn't good for these other times. Like, it's baseball. And Happ's got a no trade clause as well. And he's expressed why he wanted that no trade clause. Happ is not being traded. They're not going to DFA him. He will be in left field playing solid defense and putting up yet another strong offensive season. Happ is not the problem. The problem is that if you think Happ is supposed to be your number 1 or number 2 player, that is a you problem, right? And that's also a Cubs problem, that they need to develop some other guys to be in there. But yeah, I mean, they're offensively, it's Tucker that they've got to replace. Willie Castro's gone. Okay, whatever, fine, move on. You get a Miguel Amaya back. Reese McGuire's gone, but by and large, I mean, their lineup is pretty much the same, with the exception of Tucker, which is obviously a big change. If we were talking about June Kyle Tucker, we're talking about the rest of the season Kyle Tucker, like, oh, okay,
Well, and 2 things need to happen though, because the Cubs need to be looking towards next year. Like, what does their roster look like? But they need to be looking towards 2027, because, man, things really, I mean, you've got Happ, Suzuki, Tyon, Nico. I mean, the number of free agents in 2027 is like an organization changer. And what are the Cubs going to do with PCA? Are they going to sit on PCA and let him, get to free agency without extending him? What are the Cubs going to do with Michael Busch? Are they going to do the same thing with him? It's just, and so it's kind of like, there's a lot of questions going into this offseason. Like, there's always a lot of questions, but it's just the number of questions, not just for next season, but for beyond, is really like astounding. And it's organizational.
Well, and consider that the CBA expires after next season. And so, now, like, there are teams that that are absolutely, like, Tucker's season this year could not have come at a worse time for him, because clearly the dude is not going to make nearly. Now, again, unless some team comes out of the woodwork and just goes crazy, he's not going to make nearly as much as what he had anticipated. Like, back in June, he was sitting there like, oh, hey, $500 million seems like a no-brainer. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But not only that, not only did his production fall off, but you had the injuries for the second straight year. You had just kind of that disappointing performance down the stretch. And you've got the market for the services of a player of that caliber or that kind of money is going to be limited anyway. But now you've got teams like, I would say a team like the Rangers that had spent a bunch of money in the past few seasons, building up that World Series roster. Like, they've got a ton of money on the books. They're not going to be looking to go after somebody like Tucker. So I think you have a very limited number of teams, even more so than maybe before, they're going to be willing to add that kind of an obligation ahead of the vast unknown. Like, the one thing that's almost certain, is that we're going to get a lockout or a strike, right? There's going to be a work stoppage of some sort. We don't know what the structure of the CBA clearly is going to come out of that. The owners are going to press for a salary cap. right? The players are going to be steadfastly against that. So there's all kinds of problems there. So I just think, and I think the Cubs are among those teams that probably are not going to want to extend themselves very far on these monster. They already don't want to do monster contracts. We've seen that time and time again. And this is the one thing I said, like if it wasn't Tucker, if he was not the one, all things considered, now this is before the season, and I think they've cooled significantly on even the possibility of him even on a shorter, cheaper contract. But if it wasn't going to be him, he seemed to check all their boxes. They're not doing a deal like that flat out. Like, I don't know if they'll ever do one, and certainly not with an impending work stoppage after the season, and who knows where that money goes. So I'm not convinced that they're going to see this past, we call it a failure or whatever, the disappointment of this season and the postseason at the hands of the Brewers as something that spurs them to step up their spending. I could be wrong, but
well, I mean, if Ricketts is looking at the bottom line, I bet you it's pretty healthy. And so why would you change anything? If you're Tom Ricketts, I mean, obviously you want to win. Everybody wants to win, but it feels like Ricketts is more of a bottom line guy than most Major League Baseball franchise owners, and definitely most big market teams. And if he is, then the bottom line has got to be looking really, really good, especially with all of his investments around Wrigley Field, the rooftops, all the things that they own. They're not doing bad, right? And the value of the team just continues to skyrocket, although that doesn't help today. At some point in the future, it will help, or if they want to, get debt to do some whatever, build Disneyland across the street, they can do that, right? And so that they've got things financially for the Ricketts family are looking really, really good. And so if that's what they're satisfied with and just putting a winner out, they've got it, right? I mean, they don't need to change anything.
Well, that's what he has said, that asset appreciation is the main goal of professional sports team ownership. That has clearly been going quite well for them. They're one of the most valuable franchises in Major League Baseball, certainly, and across sports, professional sports. We go globally, they're not quite with like some of the European football teams there, but soccer to the layperson. But if he can get that, like making money, because a lot of people think it is all about making money and generating positive cash that he's putting in his pockets. And yes, that's a big deal. They want that. They don't want to lose money year over year, but that's not even the primary goal. But if you can accomplish both, if you can appreciate your asset while also actually improving the cash flow that is going into your bank accounts, I mean, right? That's the goal.
That's what this is. That's what this is. Just everyone, just so you know, this is a big business that's for profit. These are not nonprofits.
But here's what happens, right? If there is and where do the Cubs? We know that their TV deal isn't nearly as lucrative as what it could have been if they had figured it out 5 years earlier. It's still better than what it used to be, but clearly it's not great, especially with the way the regional sports network, just the way that whole market has gone, that whole industry, with cable and with carriage fees and having those battles and things like that. Like marquee is not nearly as lucrative as what the Dodgers have. We know that. It's not even as big as what several other teams have that got their local broadcast deals inked well before the Cubs launched marquee in 2020, which is the worst timing ever. I won't repeat all that, but those are still fixed costs with that, right? But where do the Cubs make most of their money? They make tons and tons and tons of money from 40,000 people showing up, buying tickets, buying beers, buying $14 coffees, all that. That all goes away in 2027 if there is a lockout, right? All your overhead, now some of that gets reduced, right? Because you're not paying game day workers and that sort of thing, and there is a significant financial impact, but there's no games on marquee, so there's no advertising. Nobody's paying for those ads, right? If you got to renegotiate any carriage deals, you think Xfinity is gonna bump your carriage rate for marquee when they're not even playing games? That's what hurt them in 2020. So do you want to have a guy on the books who's making 40 or 50 million dollars? And they'll try to negotiate some of that, but like, I don't think these teams, some of them are going to want to avoid this. So I look at this and I really have serious questions about how committed the Cubs will be from a financial standpoint because they got a lot of guys they got to replace. Not a ton, but like Brad Keller, free agent, Caleb Thielbar, free agent. Those are two of their best relievers. Justin Steele's still not going to be healthy for the first part of the season, right? Do you expect Jameson Taillon to keep pitching really well? They got to figure out what to do with Shota Imanaga's option. There's all kinds of things there, but you've got to replace. You don't have to just replace Kyle Tucker's production. You've got to find a way to make your offense better than what it was or how it ended up being as the season went on. Like, you can't just sit back because the Brewers are going to keep doing what the Brewers do. You got to still compete with now it's time. Making the postseason is one thing, and now we've seen that they didn't have the firepower to compete there. So now you're going to make your team better. How are you going to do that without spending tons and tons of money? So I don't know. We'll see. But I think they're going to be, again, looking at short-term deals. I think they're going to try to find bargains again, as they always have. And that isn't to say they can't come back and put out another 90-win team. But I don't know. I will be very surprised if they show us, you'd call it a commitment. I don't want to say, like you said, they want to win. It's not like they don't care about winning, because guess what? Ricketts makes a hell of a lot more money. You get 3 postseason home games, actually 5, but 3 in a row for the wild cards, just making it, and they got 2 more. So those 5 extra games in the postseason, that's significant from a revenue perspective. When you've got 40,000 plus people there in and around the ballpark, when you're holding watch parties on Gallagher Way for away games, right? You're raking in extra money. They want that. But how committed are they to truly building a team that they believe is capable of winning it all, versus how much do they say, let's keep with the same thing. This has been working. We're going to do enough to remain plausibly competitive, to possibly battle for a division title, definitely fight for a wild card spot, maybe win some games in the postseason. That's really all they've got to do, right? Fans will keep showing up, coming back. Now, and I go the opposite. I'm not the guy who says Wrigley Field's full no matter what, because we saw that wasn't the case. If they're a bad baseball team, that place was half empty in the second half of some of those seasons. Like, it's a vastly different situation if they're actually good. If you provide a team that can remain above 500, be plausibly in competition for a postseason spot, people will throw their money at it, right? They will put money out in the driveway and set it on fire effectively to get those tickets, to get the swag, whatever else. It's dependent upon how much the Cubs want to spend to make that happen.
The Cubs' attendance in 2022, which what was their record in 2022? I'll look right now. They had 74 wins. The Cubs' attendance in that year was still 32,000 people, 32,305. And their attendance this year was 37.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot, right?
They're more than
5,000 times 80,
so, that's the thing.
Right? Or 70, I guess 79, right? But that's a lot. But like you said, how much? What's the average? What's the average ticket?
I think their break-even points like 18,000 fans or something like that. And that what?
Yeah, if they're half full, they basically break even on their overhead. So
yeah.
But if we said 5,000 fans average times $50 a ticket, that's $250,000 per game, right? Times, we'll say 81, even though they only got 70. That's $20 million. But, right, so $20 million, okay, that could go either way. You can't entirely project that, right? She could say, well, maybe if we're a little bit better, maybe we save some of that. But if you sign a player for $20 million a year, well, then you damn well make sure that you get those extra 5,000 people, right? And I think that's how they look at this, is like, okay, but what if we sign a guy for $10 million and we only need 2,500 of those fans to show up instead of 5,000?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's.
And I hope they're not looking at it at that level.
I bet the I will guarantee you business operations has this thing broken down to the point that they know exactly, especially with everything, because business operations drives at the end of the day, they're the ones that set the budget. Crane Kenny and his team set the budget, and then Jed Hoyer has to operate with.
I'm assuming they know the answers, they have the data, but what I'm hoping is that they're not actually using that data to make these decisions.
Well, certainly,
so I think there's two different things, right?
I'm being a little bit reductive in just taking. Now, the other thing is, I was just counting gate fee. That's all that was. So that's not counting your burgers and your beer and your parking and spending money at the Ricketts Hotel and all that. So that 20 million figure is probably closer to 30 or 40 million over the course of a season when you factor all that in. And again, those things are all different. But with the work stoppage being very likely, I think they're going to be very, very targeted with how they go about this. And again, I would love, and this is nostalgia. This is because they need left-handed thunder, and he's a good draw at the gate. Man, Kyle Schwarber, going and splurging on him, bringing him back, kind of rewriting the mistakes, righting the wrongs of the past. And you've got a way that you can go now trade. They will not, if you're not going to go spend on a guy, if you're not going to go buy a pitcher in free agency, the only way you're going to get a stud pitcher in there is to trade for one. The only way you're going to trade for a stud pitcher is by moving some top prospects.
But what is Schwarber going to get paid? $50 million
a year?
Yes.
No, I mean, he'll make good money, but I figure, but there's the other thing though. Does some team just come out of there and be like, we'll give you $200 million for 5 years? You know what I mean? Like, okay, like that's, because he's a bit of a one-trick pony. But that's a trick I would love to see the Cubs have when you have some other. If you got some,
I wonder how much the fact that the Cubs and Jed Hoyer released our friend Kyle Schwarber plays into the odds that they would even consider bringing him back, because you sure do kind of look. I mean, they look silly anyways for having released him in the first place.
Hey, money. It comes down to money, right? If they were going to pay him, like if he was. I don't think he would turn down. I don't think he's taking a discount by any stretch to come back, but I don't think he would turn down if money was the same. I think he's looking at the team that's most competitive and it's going to give him the best chance to win. If the Cubs offered more money, which the Cubs offer more money than someone, right? Like, but here's the funny thing, right? When we think about when they spent a bunch of money on dudes, like, as much as people want to dog the Jason Hayward deal, the Cubs offered less money than both the Cardinals and the Nationals to him. He took less to go there. Ben Zobrist took less to come to Chicago. Other guys, like the Cubs, were spending a lot of money, but they were getting discounts on these guys because these people bought into the vision that they had, and it paid off, right? It worked. It came to fruition. But that's no longer the case. The Cubs are not able to get now. Can they get a discount on Shota Imanaga when his market doesn't come to fruition? Like now, I said the word fruition twice in like 30 seconds. It's kind of weird. Did they get him at a cheaper rate because his market fell through? Yeah, absolutely. They got kind of lucky there. That can happen, but it's not as if he had all these offers on the table and took the Cubs at a much lower amount. They just kind of got lucky there. So I think we're going to see more of the same, though. I think we're going to see them continue to try to find those bargains, continue to try to exploit little loopholes here and there, find undervalued, underappreciated guys.
They want to try to get cute. They're going to build a bullpen the same way they've built a bullpen the past several years.
More than
and
likely.
It'll probably work with guys on 1 year, $2 million deals.
But will it be the same? Here's my question. I'll say me, because I've fallen for it, but I'll put it out there for we, because I'm sure some of you also have. Are we going to do the Charlie Brown thing? Because, how many times Hoyer kept doing this, and he'd only buy the cheap 1 year relievers. And then it was like, oh, the Cubs are exploring all these multi-year, and they were in on Tanner Scott, and he wanted to come to Chicago, but the Dodgers threw in a little bit of extra money, and the Cubs were like, nope, we're out. And so it's like every year we hear the same, like, okay, surely after seeing A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z, surely now is when you will do it. And it's like,
Well,
nope.
and the interesting thing is if anything this postseason is proving is the value of those really good relievers, especially kind of the longer relievers, are the guys that can, if you've got injuries to your starting pitching staff, can come in and fill the gaps. And we're seeing that play out in a number of different ways. The Dodgers are kind of doing it the other way, right? They're saying we've got so many starters, they're just gonna be our bullpen. And so that's one way to go too.
But and that's the thing, though, is these guys, when you see these dudes getting shifted back there, when you see a team like, again, calling it back to earlier, the Cubs need power arms. You need dudes who miss bats. And that's why when people were shocked somehow that Javier Assad was left off the postseason rosters for both playoff series, it's because Javier Assad does not miss bats. He does not strike guys out. Like that's not a guy, and that was the problem. Imanaga couldn't get anybody out, and that was part of it. Jameson Taillon did well, but still is skating on thin ice. His strikeout rate has continued to plummet, and it's barring a huge change, is not going to get any better as he continues into his mid-30s. There, even Justin Steele doesn't miss a ton of bats, and that didn't matter. Even Cade Horton, again, is a guy who, and that improved a little bit, but that's what we saw, and that's what beat the Cubs, is when it came down to it. We just talked about it. 2 men on, no outs, 3-1 count, and yet Aaron Ashby is still able to come in and fire a couple bullets, get a strikeout, get out of there, get the liner, get another strike. Like, you have to be able to miss bats, and the Cubs did not do that well enough. They do not throw hard enough. Their velocity is just not, they're like, oh, the rest of the league is going with all these guys who throw hard. We're going to get all starters who throw 92. That's it, 92. Oh, if a guy throws 95 in our starting rotation, that's just gas. And yet, look across at what some of these other teams are doing, and it's just they need to go out and find power. They need loud tools from their pitchers and their hitters. And right now in the system, they got a couple of guys, Jackson Wiggins, one. That's by far a guarantee, not a guarantee for next year. They need to go load up. They need those arms. You need to have like 4 dudes who pitch like closers, nasty stuff, throwing 100. You need some starters who are throwing 100, right? Or getting close to it more frequently, because you have power beats power. When you get down to it in the postseason, that is what we have seen. And the Cubs just did not have the power to play with the Brewers, which is weird to say and shouldn't be the case, but it is what it is.
Certainly a lot for us to discuss going forward. There's a lot more. I mean, we just kind of touched the surface here of what we will be talking about during the off season. Hopefully we're talking about some signings that the Cubs will make that are significant to the roster, but we will see. On the other hand, one thing I wanted to touch on is World Series predictions. I mean, obviously we're pretty far down the path. Seattle is up 2-0 over Toronto. The Dodgers are up 1-0 against the Brewers. I'll toss it to you. Who do you think goes to the World Series, and who's the winner?
I mean, obviously right now it's kind of the Mariners look like the pick. Although I predicted that back on there's another show I joined a couple weeks ago, and I said, actually, and I thought the Phillies would make it, so I thought it'd be Phillies and Mariners. So I was, I'm not just tooting my horn there, but I'll say Mariners and Dodgers for sure. And you know what? Let's just go. Like, give me the Mariners. Give me the Mariners in 6.
Okay. Interesting. Saucy, spicy.
A little bit.
I am going to say that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to come back and beat the Mariners in 7. So I'm taking the Blue Jays to do it. There's a lot of, I traveled around Canada this summer, and there is a lot of, I wouldn't say anti-American, I would say anti-Trump, because they were really nice to me. Canadians are just nice in general. And I think that there are a lot of people. I mean, the Blue Jays were on every TV up there, and I was in British Columbia. And so that's the national team. It's the only Canadian team. And so I think a lot of people are really kind of behind their team, and there's like a national kind of movement. And so I think they're going to pick up on that. I think they're going to get the momentum, and they're going to play the Dodgers. I think the Brewers are going to be lucky if they don't get swept. That's what it comes down to. The Dodgers, I think the Blue Jays, Dodgers, it's like a toss-up between those two. I really do think the Blue Jays can win. And I'm going to go with the Blue Jays. I'm going to go with the Blue Jays in 7. So I think they're going to need 2 7-game series in order to win the World Series. And that's what I'm saying. And I'm writing it down. And I wrote this down the last time we did this, but then I don't know where I put the piece
threw it away.
Where I wrote it. So I'm going to save this. There's a piece of paper here, and I'm going to save it so that we can look back to see. So for better or worse, we'll see.
Fair enough.
We get nothing for this. I don't ever gamble, so if I did, I'd lose. And so that's why I don't gamble. But
yeah, I haven't even done. You know, it's funny. Like I haven't done anything on even like daily fantasy sports or anything, FanDuel, DraftKings, in probably a couple years, at least over a year. Which is funny because like the ads are only more prevalent, and I think that's part of it. It's just like it's become so ubiquitous. Like at a point, it was like, oh, okay, this is a fun little thing, cool, I enjoy it. And then I'm like, I'm just so inundated by it that I'm like, okay, now it's like a response to it. Like screw you guys. So like you're everywhere. You don't need my money, you know. Like, yeah, I'm just avoiding it. It's like, yeah, I don't need to fuel this any further. Like this is, and I also I love this too. Like every one of them has to add with like gambling problem. Call like, oh sure, you're sponsoring every single show that's out there. The actual regional sports networks are named for gambling sites, and then it's like, oh, you have a gambling problem? Like, if nobody had a gambling problem, you guys wouldn't even be in business. Like, you know what? It's the same thing as, you know, like if you go to Europe, you know, and you buy a pack of cigarettes, it's like there's a picture of just a cirrhotic liver, or I guess that'd be more alcohol, but like just black lung, you know, or a premature baby. Like that's how they wrap their cigarette packs in Europe. Like they're saying,
and they smoke like chimneys over there.
Exactly. Like they smoke way more over there. It's bizarre to go, you walk around in Italy or whatever, like every other person is smoking. And it's like a black wrap pack with every time you pull it up, it's like, oh, here's somebody with a tracheotomy tube, you know? So yeah, I find that funny. So same thing, you know, we just gamble more than anybody. So that's fine.
Yeah. So we're here for it. Anyways, thanks for joining us, everyone. Check us out. Follow us on CubsInsider.com, YouTube, all the places that you like to go. And can handle.
Yeah.
Up to you. So till next time.
See ya.